My name is Avery Collins, and if I had known that my 18th birthday would be the night my entire world collapsed, I might have prepared myself better. But nothing, not even the quiet feeling that I had never fully belonged in my own home, could have warned me for what happened when the front door closed behind me and my family decided I no longer existed. Here is the part no one expects when they ask about the day everything in my life changed. They expect chaos. They expect screaming. They expect something sharp or violent or dramatic. But the truth is much colder. It started with my mother standing in the kitchen, holding a stack of papers like she was presenting evidence in a trial that I did not know I was attending. Her voice was almost calm, too calm, and that calmness scared me more than the rage that followed. Before I tell you what she said, let me leave you with the question that kept me awake for years afterward. What would you do if the people who raised you suddenly decided you were nothing more than a mistake they were tired of carrying? That was my hook into hell. I walked into the kitchen expecting a birthday card, maybe a small cake. My family had never been sentimental, but birthdays were predictable. A dinner, a forced group photo, something normal. Instead, my mother turned toward me with a look I had never seen before. Hatred is too simple a word. It was rejection made human. She told me to sit. I did. Within moments I realized the seat beneath me was disappearing. "Avery, you are not your father's daughter," she said, her eyes locked on mine as if she enjoyed watching the pieces of me fall apart. "I should never have kept you." My stepfather, Ray Collins, sat in his recliner with the TV muted. He stared at the blank screen as if it offered him shelter from responsibility. He did not look at me. Not once, not even when my chest tightened so painfully I could barely breathe. My mother continued like she had rehearsed every line. She told me I was the result of an affair she regretted, that she had stayed with Ray only because I was young and she did not want the neighbors to talk, but now that I was legally an adult, she no longer had an obligation to keep me. Obligation. That was the word she used. The college applications she helped me complete, the meetings with the guidance counselor, the excitement I thought she had shared with me about my future, all of it had been a performance. Because as she stood there, she told me she had already withdrawn my enrollment earlier that morning. The college fund they promised had been spent renovating the kitchen. The boxes she had placed near the door were filled with my belongings. My backpack had already been packed for me. I tried to look at Ray. He was the man who taught me how to ride a bike, who sat through every school play, even when I only had one line. But now he would not say a single word. When I whispered, "Dad," he flinched like the word offended him. My mother pointed to the door. She told me to get out and never come back. She said it so confidently, so cleanly, that it almost sounded reasonable. She handed me the backpack and said there was $42 inside. Then she gave a small, satisfied smile, as if she had solved a problem. There was a moment, a tiny one, where I thought she was going to take it all back. Maybe she would say she was stressed or overwhelmed. Maybe Ray would finally stand up and tell her she had gone too far. But instead, she opened the door, and she pushed me through it. The air outside was bitter. I could hear the lock click behind me. When I turned around, the lights in the living room were already dimming. Through the window, I saw my mother pour herself a glass of wine, like she had just finished dusting the furniture, instead of erasing her daughter. I stood there on the porch holding a backpack that suddenly felt heavier than everything I had ever carried. 18 years. 18 years of trying to earn love that was never real. 18 years of believing that if I just behaved better, or worked harder, or became someone they could be proud of, they would finally see me. Instead, on the night that was supposed to mark the beginning of my future, my family decided to end my place in theirs. I walked down the steps slowly, almost waiting for someone to open the door and call me back. No one did. The neighborhood was quiet, the kind of quiet that made you wonder if the world had been waiting for this moment all along. Here is the part that stays with me the most. It was not the push, it was not the money, it was not the lies about my father, or the college fund, or the months of planning behind my back. It was the silence. The silence that said I was no longer theirs, the silence that said I had never been. And that, right there, is when something inside me shifted. Breaking hurts. But it also makes room for something else, something sharp, something determined. That night, I did not know who I would become. I did not know that I would build a life so far from the one they tried to trap me in, that they would one day show up at my gate, begging for mercy. All I knew was this: if the people who created me did not think I was worth keeping, then I would become someone they could never ignore again, even if it meant starting alone, even if it meant starting with nothing. People like to say that the worst part of being abandoned is the moment the door shuts behind you, but that is only true if the story ends there. Mine didn't. For me, the worst part came after, when I discovered that losing your home is just the first cut. The deeper wounds come from the people who keep cutting long after you are already bleeding. I did not realize how quickly rumors travel in a small town until the first door closed in my face. The morning after my mother threw me out, I drove to my aunt's house. I still believed, somehow, that someone in my family would care. My Aunt Rebecca had always been the one who hugged the tightest at holidays, who said things like, "Call me anytime." I thought she would at least listen. When I knocked, I heard footsteps, a pause, then the deadbolt clicked into place. "Avery, go home," she said through the door. I swallowed hard. "I don't have a home." She hesitated, and for a moment I thought she might open it, that she might see me as the girl she used to love instead of whatever my mother had told her. But her voice came back colder. "Your mother warned me you'd come. She said you stole from her. She said you're using. I can't get involved in that." Using, the word hit harder than the door that shut a second later. That was when I realized something that felt like another hook, twisting into the story of my life. When your family decides who you are, the truth doesn't matter. Their version becomes the only version people believe. My phone buzzed nonstop that day, not with support, not with concern, with notifications, comments, tagging, laughter. My ex had posted a picture someone had taken of me washing my hair in a gas station sink. The caption read, "When junkies hit rock bottom." There were laughing emojis everywhere. People I had helped with homework, kids who used to sit at my lunch table. Even some teachers clicked like. I remember staring at the screen thinking, if this is rock bottom, then what comes after? I drove to the bank next. I thought if I could withdraw the savings from my part-time jobs, maybe I could afford a motel for a few nights. Instead, the bank teller, a woman who used to give me lollipops when I was little, looked at me with careful pity. "Your account is empty." I shook my head. "That's impossible." She turned the screen toward me. The withdrawal slip carried a signature I recognized instantly. Chloe Harper, my best friend since 3rd grade. The girl who promised we'd move to the city together after graduation. The girl who had stayed in my house more nights than her own. She took all $3,000. The teller lowered her voice. "Your mother said you might show up. She told us you're not well, that you can't manage your own money." I walked out of the bank with nothing. Not just no money, no identity, no voice. My mother had spoken for me, and the world believed her. By then, my phone was lighting up again. A message from Chloe. "Sorry. Your mom explained everything. I couldn't let you waste the money." I read it twice, then a third time. My mother had not only stolen my future but had recruited others to help bury me. I went to the diner where I worked weekends thinking maybe I could pick up extra shifts, but the manager, a tired-looking woman with deep lines around her mouth, stepped outside before I even reached the door. "Your mother called. She said you stole from your last job. I can't have that kind of trouble here." She handed me $20 from her own pocket like she was giving food scraps to something wounded on the sidewalk. That $20 was the only kindness I received that week. Hook moment. This is when I learned the truth that carried me through the darkest years of my life. Sometimes your family doesn't just abandon you, they rewrite the story of who you are, so that no one will ever help you stand back up. By the third night, sleep in my car felt less like sleep and more like drifting in and out of panic. Every time a headlight passed, I jolted awake, thinking it was my mother, or the police, or someone who believed the rumors enough to hurt me. I curled under my blanket, listening to my breath fog the windows. I kept telling myself, I could rebuild from this. I could start over. But the world kept pushing back. The next morning, I walked into the grocery store hoping to apply for a stock job. The manager looked at my application and asked, "Aren't you the Collins girl?" I nodded. He folded the paper in half and handed it back. Not a good fit, just like that. No explanation. No chance to defend myself against a lie I never got to tell. That night, my hands shook so badly I could barely hold the steering wheel. I drove past my old house. I told myself it was just curiosity, But really, I was hoping for a miracle. Maybe the porch light would be on. Maybe the door would open. Maybe someone would call my name. Instead, through the window, I saw a teenage girl sitting in my place at the table, laughing, wearing a sweater that used to be mine. In that moment, something inside me cracked so loudly, it felt like the world should have heard it, not because they replaced me, but because they replaced me so easily. I sat in my car for a long time, staring at the life that used to be mine. Then, I realized something that would fuel every step of the future I had not yet built. If they could erase me this cleanly, then I would have to become someone impossible to erase. That decision did not erase the pain. It did not warm the cold nights. But it planted something fierce inside me. Something that whispered, "You will not break here." And I didn't, but I did freeze. And that freezing is what led me to the diner that saved my life. But that part of the story comes next. People imagine homelessness as one big moment of collapse, a dramatic fall from stability to nothing. But what they don't tell you is that homelessness is not one moment at all. It is thousands of small ones, tiny humiliations, quiet dangers, the slow erosion of a person's sense of worth. And the worst part is how quickly you get used to it. After my reputation was destroyed and every door in town shut on me, I had no choice but to make my car my home. If you can even call it that. Home implies somewhere safe, somewhere warm, somewhere that protects you. My Honda did none of that. The first night, I told myself it would be temporary, a night or two until I found work, a few more until I figured out where to go next. That lie kept me sane, at least for a while. By the fourth night, the lie was harder to believe. I parked in the far corner of a Walmart lot, near a broken streetlight that flickered like it was struggling to stay alive right alongside me. The blanket I curled under was thin, barely enough to stop the cold from creeping into my bones. I wrapped my arms around myself and listened to the hum of distant highway traffic, pretending it was the sound of a world that still had space for me. But here is the part people never confess. Loneliness is loud, louder than any passing car or buzzing street lamp. It presses against your ears until you can't think about anything except the silence of having nowhere to go. Every hour someone walked past my car, I jolted awake, terrified they were coming for me, terrified they believed the rumors and wanted to hurt me, terrified they might knock on the window and drag the truth of my situation into daylight. Because that was the hook clawing at the back of my mind every night. It wasn't the danger that scared me most, it was the shame of being seen, the shame of becoming exactly what my mother told everyone I already was. By the end of the second week, the cold became a living thing. It slipped into the car through cracks I didn't know were there. It crawled into my clothes, my hair, my skin. Frozen breath clung to the windshield, and every time I exhaled it felt like the world was pushing winter deeper into me. I tried to find work, anywhere. I walked into grocery stores, gas stations, fast food places, but the moment they recognized my name or my face, the conversation ended. Some were polite, some weren't, but the answer was always the same: not a good fit. Which was code for, "We heard your mother's version of you." The cold made everything feel heavier. Hunger made it worse. I stretched a $1 menu sandwich into 2 meals. On days I couldn't even afford that, I pretended I wasn't hungry. Pretending, it turned out, was something I had always been good at. There was one night I will never forget, the night the temperature dropped lower than the forecast predicted, the night the car heater sputtered twice before dying completely, the night the air inside the car grew so icy that my fingers stopped bending. I pulled the blanket tighter, but it did nothing. The cold was inside me now, settling into my chest, slowing my thoughts. It felt like drifting, like slipping underwater, like the world was softly, patiently, erasing me. I remember thinking maybe this was the universe agreeing with my mother. Maybe I really wasn't meant to stay. Maybe the people who bring you into the world are the ones who decide whether you get to stay in it. I do not know how long I sat there fading, minutes, hours. Everything was blurry. My breaths grew so shallow they barely registered. My hands went numb first, then my lips, then the inside of my heart. But here is the hook that saved my life. Sometimes rock bottom doesn't kill you. Sometimes it points you toward the exact place where your life begins again. At about 5 in the morning, I opened my stiff car door and stumbled onto the icy pavement. My legs barely worked. My vision shook. I followed the only light still open at that hour, a neon sign buzzing over a small diner. Warm yellow windows glowing like a promise, Marlene's Diner. I pushed the door open, and a wave of heat washed over me so abruptly it brought tears to my eyes. The smell of coffee and bacon nearly broke me. I collapsed into the first booth I could reach, my body shaking so violently the table rattled. People stared. I would have stared too. I looked like a ghost wearing someone else's clothes. A woman in her 60s walked over, broad shoulders, soft eyes, silver hair pulled into a loose bun. She looked at me the way people used to before my mother rewrote my story. "Honey," she said, "you look like the night tried to swallow you whole." I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came out. I was too cold, too tired, too empty. Without asking another question, she set a plate of eggs, toast, and hash browns in front of me. She refilled the coffee mug 3 times before I finished the first one. Eat first, talk later. That is the rule here. Her name was Marlene Brooks, and in that moment, she was the only person in the world treating me like a human being. I ate with shaking hands, tears dripping onto the plate. Marlene didn't flinch. She didn't judge. She didn't ask why I was homeless, or why I looked like I was one breath away from disappearing. She simply said, "When you're ready, you can tell me whatever you want, or nothing at all, but you're staying here until you warm up." I didn't know it then, but that diner would become the place that rebuilt me from ruins, and Marlene would become the first person in years to believe I was worth saving. And that is where the next part of my story begins, not in the cold, but in the warmth of someone who cared. If the night before had been the moment I nearly froze to death, then stepping into Marlene's diner that morning felt like crossing into another world. Warmth, light, smells that reminded me of mornings when life used to feel simple. Even the clatter of dishes sounded softer here, like the universe had finally decided to stop shouting at me long enough for me to breathe. I didn't know it yet, but that diner would become the first place in months where I wasn't treated like a story someone else wrote about me. After I stopped shaking enough to lift the coffee cup without spilling it, Marlene slid into the booth across from me. She didn't crowd me. She didn't interrogate me. She simply looked at me with the steady patience of someone who had seen more storms than I could imagine. "You remind me of my daughter," she finally said. Same stubborn eyes. I swallowed hard. I didn't trust my voice, so I didn't try. She nodded toward my hands, which were still red and raw from the cold. "How long were you out there?" I didn't know how to explain time when every night felt like a lifetime, so I answered the only way I could. "Too long." She let out a soft breath, then stood. "Come on." I must have looked terrified, because she gave me a reassuring smile. "Not kicking you out, sweetheart, just helping." She led me behind the counter, through a narrow hallway, and into a small supply room that smelled like cinnamon and cardboard. There was a cot tucked between shelves of sugar and paper cups, a thin pillow folded neatly at the top. "You can sleep here for a bit," she said. "As long as you need. That storm took a beating out of you." I stared at the cot like it wasn't real. "Why are you doing this for me?" Marlene shrugged. "Because someone once did it for me. And because you walked through that door, instead of giving up. That tells me enough." I lay down, intending to rest for just a moment. Instead, I slept for almost 12 hours. When I woke, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Safety. Thin, fragile, but real. When I stepped back into the diner, Marlene handed me a plate of meatloaf and mashed potatoes. "Eat. Then tell me if you're looking for work. I could use an extra pair of hands." Work. The word felt foreign after so many doors had slammed in my face. But here, in this warm-lit diner, it sounded like possibility. I told her the truth. I didn't have a resume. I didn't have clean clothes. I didn't even have a phone charger that worked half the time. She waved a hand. "I didn't ask about any of that. I asked if you want work. The rest we figure out." So I said yes. The next morning, I found myself wiping down tables, refilling sugar containers, and learning how to fold napkins into perfect triangles. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest, and for the first time since losing everything, I felt useful. But here was the part I didn't expect. Working at the diner didn't just give me food or warmth, it gave me back pieces of myself that I thought were gone. The rhythm of the morning rush, the small conversations with regular customers, the satisfaction of closing the place clean and quiet at the end of the night. Marlene watched me closely, not with suspicion, but with an almost maternal curiosity. She saw things in me I had forgotten were there. One afternoon, I reorganized the spice shelf because the labels were bothering me. Another morning, I fixed the old credit card reader simply by cleaning dust from the connection port. A few days later, I created a color-coded system for inventory because the previous setup made no sense. Every time Marlene caught me doing something like that, she raised an eyebrow like she had been waiting for it. "Plenty of people know how to work hard," she said one day. "But you see things, you solve things. That's different." Her words lodged somewhere deep inside me. I didn't realize I was starving for that kind of belief until she gave it to me. And then came the moment that changed everything. It was a slow Tuesday morning. A man in his early 40s sat at the counter, typing on a laptop. He was a regular, always coming in at the same time, always ordering black coffee and oatmeal, always tipping exactly $2 no matter the bill. I didn't know his name then, only that he had thoughtful eyes and a quiet presence that made people speak softer around him. He watched me restock the to-go cups with mechanical precision. After a moment, he said, "You're new." I nodded. "Kind of." He gestured toward the sticky notes on the inventory clipboard. "You color code everything." I felt heat rise in my cheeks. "Sorry, force of habit." "Don't apologize. Most people don't think that way." He introduced himself. "Ethan Ward." I knew the name, everyone did. He was the founder of a tech startup across town. Then, he asked the question that would become the doorway to the rest of my life. "You ever think about solving problems that don't involve coffee lids and ketchup bottles?" I didn't know how to respond. No one had spoken to me like that in months. Like I still had potential, like my brain mattered, like I wasn't just the girl my mother ruined. But Ethan saw something in me before I was brave enough to see it myself. And that conversation marked the beginning of the shift I never saw coming. As the diner windows reflected the morning light, and as Marlene watched from the kitchen with a knowing smile, I realized something. Sometimes the people who save you are not the ones you grow up with. Sometimes they are the strangers who meet you in your ruins and say you can still build something new. If you've ever had someone show up for you when you least deserved it but needed it most, tell me in the comments below. Your story might help someone who feels alone right now. And this is where everything in my life began to change. With a diner, a stranger, and a second chance I never asked for, but desperately needed. If Marlene gave me warmth, then Ethan Ward was the first person who looked at me and saw more than survival. He saw potential, and when the world had spent months telling me I had none, his attention felt like someone had cracked open a window inside a room I didn't know I was trapped in. The morning after we first spoke, he returned to the diner. Same order, same quiet presence, but this time, he watched me work with more interest than before. I tried to ignore it, but something in his gaze made me feel evaluated, not judged, evaluated, like he was measuring the gears turning inside my mind. When the breakfast rush slowed, he closed his laptop and nodded toward the clipboard I had reorganized the day before. "Most people just get through work," he said. "You redesign it." I shrugged. "Things make more sense when they're in the right place." He tapped his finger on the counter. "And who taught you that?" "No one," I said. "It just feels wrong when something isn't working as well as it could." He smiled, but not a small smile. A smile that looked like someone finding a puzzle piece they'd been hunting for. "I work with problem solvers, Avery, and you think the way they do." The way he said my name made me freeze, not because it was warm, because it was respectful. My family had spent years saying my name like it was an inconvenience. But from Ethan, it sounded like possibility. He reached into his bag and pulled out a napkin. "Tell me something," he said. "My company has 50 employees across 3 time zones. Scheduling meetings is a nightmare. How would you fix that?" I blinked at him. "You're asking me, why not you?" I wanted to laugh. I was a girl who slept in a supply closet. I wiped counters and refilled ketchup bottles. I wasn't someone a tech founder asked for solutions. But his expression didn't waver, so I took the napkin. I drew 3 circles for the time zones, then arrows, then a rotating system that evenly distributed the inconvenience. In 5 minutes, I sketched something I wasn't sure was impressive at all. But when I looked up, Ethan was staring like I'd just solved a crime scene. "You did that fast," he said softly. "It's just logic." No. That's vision. He folded the napkin like it was something valuable. Ever thought about learning to code? I stared at him. I could barely afford toothpaste, let alone a computer, but he didn't blink. I'm serious. You have the mind for it, and if you want, I can teach you the basics, or give you resources. Why would you do that for someone like me? I asked, before I could stop myself. He didn't even hesitate. Because talent is rare, and I don't care where it comes from. That line lodged in my chest, like a seed waiting to grow. The next day, Ethan returned again. And again. After a week, it felt intentional. After 2, he finally made the offer that would split my life into before and after. My team needs an intern, he said. It's not glamorous, not even paid at first. But I think you could learn a lot, and I think you need a chance more than anything. I laughed under my breath. Ethan, I don't even have a laptop. You don't need one yet. You just need to start. When he said start, something inside me leaned forward, like a door cracked open, like a whisper saying, look, your life doesn't have to end where they left you. But accepting meant admitting something to myself. That maybe I wasn't broken. Maybe I was simply buried. So I nodded. Okay. I'll try. The relief in Ethan's eyes surprised me. Almost like he'd been waiting for that answer longer than I had. Good. Then come by tomorrow after your shift. Nothing formal. Just practice. That night, lying in the supply closet, staring at the dim bulb above my head, I thought about everything my mother had said about me. Useless, hopeless, worthless. And for the first time, I wondered if maybe she wasn't the truth. Maybe she was the barrier. Here is the hook that changed the trajectory of my entire life. Sometimes all it takes is one person single personto look at you without the lies your family wrapped you in. And suddenly the world gets bigger. Over the next week, Ethan printed out coding lessons for me. Simple ones at first, variables, loops, logic, things that sounded terrifying until my brain began snapping the pieces together like it had been waiting for this language all along. Marlene watched it happen with a pride I didn't understand. She'd refill my coffee and say, see, I knew there was more in you, I just didn't know how much. Each day, I learned more. Each night, I practiced until my eyes burned. And each morning, I woke up feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. A kind of hope that terrified me because it meant I could lose it, but also the kind that kept me breathing when I thought I had nothing left to give. And this is where I want to ask you something. If you've ever had one person believe in you at the exact moment you thought no one ever would, hit the like button. Not for me, for them, for the people who hold us up before we learn how to stand again. Because the truth is this, Ethan wasn't just teaching me code. He was rewriting the story my family tried to bury me under. And soon, he would open the door to the world that would change everything. Learning to code felt, at first, like learning how to breathe underwater. Everything was unfamiliar. The logic, the rules, the structure. But Ethan had been right about one thing. My mind clicked into place the moment I understood how each piece fit together. Lines of code became tiny doors, and for the first time in my life, I had the key to open them. I worked the morning shift at the diner. Then I spent my afternoons at Ethan's office, absorbing everything. And at night, I stayed up in the supply closet practicing until sunrise. My life condensed into a cycle of exhaustion and discovery, and I found comfort in both. When you've lost everything, purpose becomes oxygen. One afternoon, while cleaning tables during a slow hour, I overheard 2 nurses from the hospital across the street. They were frustrated, complaining that the night shift scheduling kept leaving them short-staffed. One worked 3 nights in a row, another got called in during her kid's birthday. Their system, they said, was chaos. I wiped the table slower than necessary, listening. A problem, a system broken, a gap waiting to be filled. Later that day, the idea wouldn't leave my mind. It followed me through my shift at the office, through dinner, through the quiet hours when the diner closed, and I arranged cups and bins in alphabetical order just to stay awake. The thought pressed harder each hour. What if I could fix that? It was absurd. I wasn't a developer. I wasn't even an intern yet. I was just a girl with a borrowed laptop and a supply room for a bedroom. But the idea wouldn't go away. Ethan noticed the distracted look on my face that evening. What's going on in that mind of yours? I hesitated. Because saying it out loud would make it real. It's nothing, just something I overheard. Tell me anyway. So I did. I explained what the nurses said. I explained how it wasn't fair or sustainable. I explained the inconsistencies, the lack of organization, and then, without realizing I was doing it, I outlined a potential system that could track preferences, availability, and fairness. Ethan listened with his entire body still. When I finished, he leaned back slowly. Avery, that's not nothing. That's a product. Product. The word felt too big, too heavy. I shook my head. I was just thinking out loud. He smiled. Thinking like that is how most successful founders start. I sat up straighter. Founder? Was he serious? Look, he said, sliding his laptop toward me. Try building something small. A prototype. Even a simple version. You won't know what you're capable of unless you try. When he left the room, my hands hovered over the keyboard. That was when the fear hit. Not fear of failing, fear of discovering I wasn't as capable as Ethan believed, that maybe my mother had been right about me after all. But fear only wins when you stop moving. So, I started. The first lines of code were messy. The first attempts failed, the second ones did too, but I kept going, watching tutorials, asking questions, breaking things and rebuilding them, and slowly, painfully, something began to form. A simple scheduling tool, nothing fancy, nothing polished, but functional. I showed it to Ethan 2 weeks later, my voice shaking. He clicked through the prototype quietly. No expression, no reactions, just absorbed every detail. My stomach knotted. Maybe I should have kept it to myself. Then he looked up. Avery, you built this. I nodded. Sort of. No, not sort of. This is good. He pushed the laptop back to me with a spark in his eyes. Build more. So I did. Days turned into weeks. The tool grew. What started as a tiny idea became something real, something helpful, something nurses began asking about. Marlene even printed flyers and handed them to workers from the hospital when they ordered takeout. And yet, through all of it, a thought lingered. A sharp one, a painful one, a motivating one. My mother once told an entire town I would never amount to anything. Every new feature I built felt like proving her wrong. One night, exhausted but wired from coding for 16 hours straight, I closed my laptop and stared at the dark ceiling above the cot. I had nothing then. No house, no family, no safety net. But I also had something new, a direction. A version of myself that wasn't built from survival, but from possibility. And the moment I realized that, something inside me cracked open in the best way possible, because this wasn't just a tool anymore. It was proof. Proof that I could build something. Proof that I wasn't what they said I was. Proof that the people who abandoned me did not get the final say. As I drifted off to sleep, I had no idea this tiny project would become the foundation of a company. That it would change everything in my future. That it would put me in a position of power my family never could have imagined. But I did know one thing. If I could build this from a supply closet, then I could build anything. And here's a question I want you to really think about. Do you believe that people who lose everything become more dangerous or more powerful? Tell me in the comments. I want to see where you stand. Because what I did next only happened for one reason. I chose power. Shiftmate didn't explode overnight. It didn't go viral. It didn't suddenly make me rich. But it grew, steadily and quietly, like a seed pushing through concrete. And maybe that was the best thing for me. I didn't need a miracle. I needed momentum. And momentum was exactly what I got. The hospital across the street was the first to notice. Nurses started telling other departments that the system the diner girl made actually worked. They liked the fairness, the simplicity, the way it respected their time when nothing else in the healthcare system did. The diner girl. That nickname followed me into the next chapter of my life. It wasn't meant as an insult, but every time I heard it, I felt something tighten in my chest. One part shame, one part pride, and one part fire. Because if they thought I was just a diner girl, they had no idea who I was about to become. Ethan pushed me harder than anyone ever had, but never cruelly. He challenged my logic, questioned my design choices, forced me to think not like someone building a tool but someone building a company. You have vision, Avery, he said one afternoon as we reviewed the new interface. But vision means nothing unless you believe you deserve to scale it. Believe I deserved it. That part was harder. When you grow up hearing you're a mistake, earning success feels like trespassing. But every new download chipped at that lie. Every nurse who thanked me added a new piece to the version of myself I was building. One that wasn't shaped by the Collins family name, one that wasn't bound by the town's rumors, one that wasn't defined by the night I nearly froze to death. By the time the app hit 10,000 downloads, Ethan suggested something that sent a cold thrill through me. You need to form an LLC. This isn't a hobby anymore. A company. My company. The idea felt absurd. Impossible. Too large for the girl who slept in a supply closet and borrowed other people's chargers to keep her phone alive. But Ethan helped me file the paperwork. He helped me choose the name. Collins was never an option. I wasn't carrying that piece of my past into my future. Instead, I chose something new. Avery Data SOLUTIONS. Not catchy, not glamorous, but mine. When the documents came back stamped and official, I stared at them for a long time. That moment felt heavier than the night my mother had thrown me out. She had taken my name, my home, my future, but she had not taken my ability to rebuild one. I moved out of the supply closet shortly after, not because I wanted to leave Marlene, but because the business needed space. Ethan found me a small studio apartment with peeling paint and a window that didn't close all the way. It was perfect, not because it was comfortable, but because it was mine. And on the night I slept there for the first time, I cried on a mattress that still smelled like plastic, crying not from sadness, but from the terrifying realization that my life no longer resembled the ruins I had come from. Success didn't erase the past. It simply made the past smaller, compared to the size of what I was building. ShiftMate reached 50,000 users 6 months later. Hospitals across the state began requesting enterprise versions. Ethan invested $5,000 for 10% equity, a gesture I didn't fully appreciate until years later, when that investment multiplied beyond anything either of us expected. At 21, I wasn't rich, but I wasn't nobody anymore. I finally bought a used laptop of my own. I finally stopped flinching when someone said my name. I finally stopped believing that worthiness was something granted by the people who raised me. But the rise came with a strange kind of silence. The Collins family had not reached out, not once. Not when the town paper published a small piece about local software innovation. Not when people began talking about me like I was someone to watch. Not even when the app reached 6 figures in revenue. My mother didn't congratulate me. My stepfather didn't apologize. My cousin didn't unblock me. My former best friend didn't try to make things right. They all stayed quiet. It was the kind of silence that said they noticed. The kind that said they regretted. The kind that said they hoped I wouldn't notice them noticing. But I did. And every day I succeeded a little more. Their silence became louder. One night, after a 12-hour coding sprint, I sat on my apartment floor eating leftover diner meatloaf, thinking about the life I had rebuilt piece by piece, and a realization washed over me, sharp and electrifying. My family had spent years trying to convince the world I was worthless. But worthlessness doesn't build companies. Worthlessness doesn't solve problems hospitals couldn't solve. Worthlessness doesn't climb out of a car in a freezing parking lot and decide to survive anyway. I didn't know it then, but the world I was stepping into would one day collide with the world I had escaped from. And when the collision came, it wouldn't be gentle. But here is the hook that pulled me toward the next chapter of my life. People who betray you always come back not for forgiveness, but for what they think you owe them. And my family was about to remember my name again. Success changes many things, but here's one truth I learned the hard way. You can outrun the past, but the past doesn't stay where you left it. Sometimes, it circles the block, waits for you to grow strong enough, and then knocks on your door with a different face. For me, that knock came in the form of a phone call from a law office in a city I had never visited. The man on the line introduced himself calmly, almost too calmly, and asked if I was Avery Collins. My stomach tightened. My first instinct was fear. When you've rebuilt your life from ashes, unknown numbers feel like threats, not opportunities. He continued anyway. I represent the estate of your grandmother, Eleanor Brooks. I froze. My grandmother. The only person in my family who had ever shown me softness. The woman who knitted sweaters every Christmas and whispered that I deserved a future bigger than the town she lived in. The same grandmother my mother claimed had left nothing behind. Except now, a lawyer was calling me about her estate. I didn't speak at first. I just listened, "There is a secondary will," he explained, "one your mother never disclosed. It names you as the primary beneficiary under a specific condition." My heart hammered against my ribs. What condition? That you were abandoned or expelled from your household before turning 21, and that you were able to demonstrate stability independent of your parents. His next words felt like a crack of lightning. "You qualify, Avery." For a long moment, I didn't breathe. Then the reality sank in slow, heavy, and earth-shifting. My grandmother had known. She had known my mother's cruelty. She had known the kind of woman Linda Collins was. She had known that I might one day need protection from my own family. And she had tried to shield me. The lawyer asked if we could meet. I agreed. That night, I sat on the floor of my apartment, my tiny, imperfect, beloved apartment, and cried in a way I hadn't cried since the night my mother threw me out. Not because I was sad. Because for the first time, I felt chosen. Seen. Loved by someone who was gone but had left her love behind in paper and ink. But the meeting the next morning stripped away any softness still lingering in me. The lawyer's office was lined with boxes, not cardboard but evidence, financial statements, ledgers, signatures that weren't my grandmother's. And then he said the thing that shifted something cold and permanent inside me. "Your mother siphoned more than $300,000 from your grandmother's accounts over the course of 6 years. I felt the words like punches. She stole from her own mother. She stole from the woman who defended me when she didn't. She stole the money that should have been my safety net. She stole everything and then threw me out with $42 in a backpack." For a moment, all I could do was stare at the documents, my mother's handwriting, my stepfather's signatures, transfer after transfer, thousands at a time, tens of thousands, jewelry sold, property liquidated. "This," the lawyer added gently, "is not just mismanagement, it's fraud. Fraud. Fraud committed by the same woman who told an entire town that I was the disgrace." My jaw clenched until it hurt. The lawyer continued. "Your grandmother knew something was happening, even in her last years. She set aside this secondary will with a different attorney because she suspected your mother would try to hide it." He slid the final document toward me. "And this is the part your mother definitely didn't want you to see." It was a letter, handwritten, my name at the top. "Avery, if this reaches you, then the world has taken what I feared it might. But you must know this: you were never the mistake. You were my hope, and if they ever throw you away, you take this inheritance and build something so powerful that they will never be able to touch you again." I pressed the paper to my chest, feeling every word like a heartbeat. My grandmother believed in who I could become before I had any idea myself. The lawyer cleared his throat softly. "You will inherit everything that remains, and you have legal grounds to pursue the missing funds." I didn't answer right away, because my mind was spinning in one clear direction, not toward revenge yet, but toward truth. My mother hadn't changed me. She hadn't broken me. She had created the one version of me she never intended, a woman with nothing to lose, and now, everything to uncover. But the twist came later that night. A message request on Instagram, from a username I didn't recognize. "Hi Avery, it's Emily. I need help." Emily. The foster daughter who now lived in my old room. The girl wearing my old sweaters. The girl my mother replaced me with, as easily as swapping out a light bulb. I hesitated before opening it. Inside the message were videos, recordings of my mother screaming, manipulating, calling me names I hadn't heard since the night I left. Emily wrote, "I think she's using me for money. I think she lied about you. I'm scared." My hand trembled. The past wasn't circling back. It was coming straight at me. Here is the hook, the question that changed everything, and the question I want the audience to debate. If you discovered your family not only abandoned you but stole your inheritance and replaced you, would you confront them or let their own downfall unfold without warning? Because for me, that answer was about to define the rest of the story. The day I left the lawyer's office with my grandmother's letter still warm against my palm, something inside me shifted. Not anger, not vengeance, not yet. It was clarity. For years, my mother had twisted the narrative. She told everyone I was unstable, dangerous, unreliable. She had painted me as a failure long before I ever had a chance to become anything else. But now, the truth was in front of me. She hadn't just abandoned me. She hadn't just lied about me. She hadn't just replaced me. she had stolen from the one woman who ever loved me, without conditions. And that kind of betrayal demands an answer. Not the loud, dramatic kind she would expect, but the quiet kind, the kind built slowly, strategically, patiently, the kind that smiles while the people who wronged you walk right into the consequences they created. So that's exactly what I did. Word travels fast in small towns, especially when the people involved spent decades pretending to be better than everyone else. My mother, with her perfect hair and perfect lies, had always built her life on appearances, but appearances don't pay mortgages, especially not when my stepfather Ray decided to dump their savings into a guaranteed return crypto opportunity pitched by his equally clueless brother. Guaranteed. If I had $1 for every time someone says that before losing everything, I wouldn't need a company. Within 48 hours, their entire investment vanished. Within 72, their credit cards froze. Within a week, their mortgage fell behind. And within a month, the Collins family who once threw me out like trash was drowning in debt so fast they couldn't even catch their breath to lie about it. The irony tasted sweeter than anything I'd ever known. But here's the part they didn't know. Their mortgage wasn't owned by a bank anymore. It was owned by me. Yes, me, Avery, the girl they tossed out with $42 and a backpack that didn't even zip properly. I bought their mortgage quietly through one of my LLCs, making sure nothing could be traced back to my name. Ethan helped me structure the acquisition, and my grandmother's inheritance covered the rest. It wasn't illegal. It wasn't even vengeful. It was business. Business built from the same ashes they left me in. I reviewed every payment they made, every late fee, every desperate extension request they sent into the void. They pleaded with the mortgage company for grace. They didn't realize the person reading their messages was the girl they once claimed was beyond saving. If that's not poetic, I don't know what is. While monitoring their finances, I also continued messaging Emily foster girl, who now understood exactly what kind of woman Linda Collins really was. Emily sent me video after video of my mother's screaming fits, accusations, emotional manipulation, and constant obsession with maintaining the perfect facade. "You're here to make me look like a good person," my mother barked in one clip. "So act like it." Hearing her voice again didn't hurt. It reminded me of why I left, and why I could never go back. Emily confessed she wanted out but had nowhere to go. I used a portion of my inheritance to set up a small scholarship fund, quiet, discreet, and helped her move into student housing once she turned 18. My mother didn't even notice she was gone at first. That told me everything. As my business grew, new clients, new investors, new opportunities, I kept one eye on the house I once lived in, not out of longing, but to witness the irony. My mother had once thrown me out because she considered me a burden. Now she was drowning under the weight of her own choices. Ray begged friends for loans. My mother sold jewelry she once flaunted in front of neighbors, and their replacement daughter no longer played along. They were collapsing from the inside out, and I didn't have to lift a finger. Just when the pressure reached its peak, a foreclosure notice arrived at their doorstep. They had 30 days to vacate, 30 days to watch everything crumble, 30 days before the new owner me LLC took possession. You should have seen the way the town talked. Some said it was karma, some said it was tragic, some said it was long overdue, but everyone agreed on one thing. It couldn't have happened to a more deserving pair. I knew it was only a matter of time before they discovered the truth. But I wondered, would they beg? Would they manipulate? Would they pretend to love me again? What do you think someone like my mother would do if she learned the girl she threw away now owned the roof over her head? Drop your funniest guess in the comments. Serious, what would a woman like Linda Collins say when she realizes her worthless daughter is her new landlord? Because trust me, she was about to say all the wrong things. By the time the Collins household hit rock bottom, I thought I'd already prepared myself for how the story might end. But nothing, not the betrayal, not the years of silence, not the mountain of lies they built their lives on, prepared me for the moment my past walked right up to my front gate. It happened on a Tuesday morning. I was reviewing partnership contracts in my office overlooking the hillside when my security team radioed in. "Ma'am, your parents are at the gate claiming an emergency." For a moment, I didn't react. Not because I was shocked, but because the words felt strangely familiar, like déjà vu from a story I once heard about another girl who climbed out of ruin. Then I saw them on the security monitor, two figures standing beside a rental car that had seen better decades. Designer clothes stretched too tight, worn too thin, clearly bought on credit they couldn't pay anymore. My mother clutching a stack of papers like they were her last bargaining chips. Ray shifting nervously beside her, avoiding eye contact even with the camera. They looked small. They looked desperate. They looked exactly how they made me feel 7 years ago. I let them wait. A minute. Then another. Then long enough for my mother to check her reflection in the car window, trying to fix the face she had spent a lifetime using as a weapon. Finally, I pressed the intercom. Yes, the silence on their end cracked first. "Avery," my mother breathed, voice trembling. "Sweetheart, we need to talk." Sweetheart. It was almost funny. The last time she used that word, she followed it with, "Get out." I kept my tone steady, calm, distant. The kind of calm that scared people more than yelling ever could. "There is no emergency," I said. "You're here because you're broke, your house is being foreclosed on, and you discovered who owns your mortgage." My mother blinked quickly, then forced a smile so brittle it could have shattered. "This is a misunderstanding. We didn't know you were alive. I mean, we didn't know how to reach you." Ray stepped forward, shoulders slumped like a man begging for water in a desert. "We just need help. One chance. You owe us that much." I laughed, not loud, not cruel, just honest. "Oh, you," I repeated. "What exactly do I owe the people who threw me onto the street with $42 and a backpack that didn't even zip?" My mother stiffened, her mask slipping. "We raised you," she snapped. "No," I replied. "You tolerated me until I became inconvenient." The wind rustled behind them. Even nature seemed tired of her lies. She lifted the papers in her hand, foreclosure notices, bounced statements, desperate letters she probably rehearsed in the mirror. "We lost everything," she said, voice cracking. "Please, we need you." "You needed me 7 years ago," I said. "That's when you should have chosen me." Her eyes narrowed. "Avery, we're still your family." "No," I said softly. "Family doesn't discard you to make room for someone easier to control." As if summoned by the words, my phone buzzed. A text from Emily. "I heard she's on her way to you. Be careful. She's not sorry, she's scared." I placed the phone down where the intercom mic could pick up the faint ping. My mother flinched at the sound. "Avery," she hissed. "That ungrateful girl." I cut her off. "Call her ungrateful one more time," I said. "And the only thing you'll hear next is your lawyer explaining how guardianship fraud works." Ray finally broke. "Please," he whispered. "We have nowhere to go." For the first time, I looked at him, really looked. He wasn't cruel the way my mother was. He was weak. And sometimes weakness causes more damage than cruelty ever could. "You watched her throw me out," I said. "And you walked away." He shut his eyes. I continued, voice steady. "You abandoned me. Now life is returning the favor." My mother's voice rose, shrill, desperate. "You can't do this. We're your parents." "No," I said. "You're two strangers standing at a gate you'll never walk through." I opened the foreclosure app on my phone, the one linked to the mortgage I now owned. "I'm making a payment on your behalf," I said. My mother gasped with relief. "Thank you." $42, I added. "The exact amount you gave me the night you kicked me out." Her face cracked open with rage. "You spiteful, ungrateful." I clicked the intercom off. Security approached. Not rough, not aggressive. Just firm enough to escort 2 collapsing people back to their rental car. I didn't watch them leave. I didn't need to. My past was walking away, and this time, the door was closing behind them, not me. That afternoon, the local news broke the story. Not because I told them, because Emily released the footage, because the lawyer released the documents, because the truth, once buried, had finally clawed its way into daylight. Fraud investigation, misuse of funds, financial deception, everything my mother called me the world now called her. By Friday, Ray filed for divorce. By Monday, the house was sold at auction. By Wednesday, I bought it through another LLC. By the end of the month, it became a transitional home for aging out foster youth. I had rewritten the legacy my mother tried to destroy. But here's the hook, the part that still divides people when I tell this story. Was I wrong for refusing to help the people who once abandoned me? Tell me what you would have done. And if you want to hear stories where the truth fights back, where the forgotten rise, make sure to subscribe. There's so much more coming.